And now let's welcome our first guest, Laurence Kotlikoff. He's a best-selling author and a contributor at Forbes. Laurence is also a professor of economics at Boston University. He's the president of the Economic Security Planning and director of the Fiscal Analysis Center. Laurence, thanks so much for being back with us here on the show.
Great pleasure, David.
So, the topic of our show today, of course, is retiring early. And a lot of people have this goal of retiring early. But do you find in your own experience in talking with people that it often works the way they plan, or perhaps not?
I find that it doesn't. I think too many people are retiring far too early. They're taking security benefits too early. They're all sure they're going to die on time at their life expectancy. But we have to realize that's just the average age at which people die. It's not the age at which you'll actually die. And many, many people will die at very, very old ages, meaning that they'll be retired longer than they actually worked. And that presents a huge problem for people, because how are you going to pay for yourself if you live that long? The big risk in old age is not dying, because if you die young, financially speaking, it's great. You don't have to pay for anything, but it's really living long.
So and that's a good point. I mean, if you retire at 55 and you live into your 90s, that's more than 35 years of retirement income. And on the show, we're always talking about, kind of sort of when you're close to retirement, how to transition your assets to get the most income conservatively from that pool of money. But that's for people that are right on the brink of retirement. What do you find is the biggest thing that holds back the younger folks, those in their 20s or 30s or even early 40s, who dream to retire early but perhaps don't take the right steps?
Well, I think you have to kind of discipline yourself to save as much as humanly possible. Careful not to spend too much money on housing, because every month that you're paying rent, or every month you're paying mortgage and property taxes, maintenance on a condo that you own, that's money that you could otherwise be saving up for retirement. So if you want to retire early, then things have to add up, and that means you can't have everything. You have to make sacrifices. But of course, it's not that easy, because housing is, especially if you live in a city, housing is expensive. Taxes are high. Social Security contributions are high. If you look at your paycheck, whether you're rich or poor, it turns out to be much smaller than you would expect or you'd hoped.
Well, I think it's like exercise, though. It's funny. Some people say they don't have time to exercise. My answer is I'm always going to get up early enough in the morning, and I do my exercise first, and then I manage to fit everything else into my day. Well, the same is true, as you know, when it comes to saving and investing money at a younger age. If you just go from that, being a poverty-stricken college student, first get in the workforce and say, I'm going to save 10% of my money and spend the rest. If that savings happens first, then you're in a better situation. But problem becomes people get into debt. Now, how important do you think it is for people to be debt-free in order to be able to retire early?
Well, student debt is a huge problem for a lot of young people. They take on too much debt. They don't realize the high interest rates are so expensive in terms of paying them back, and how long they're going to have to pay them back for. Even if you don't have any debt, living, for example, in Los Angeles, if you're making $75,000 a year, an undergraduate who gets a job at $75K living in LA would think they've made it, right? But it's not true. You basically are close to starving if you even ignoring any debt repayments, when you factor in the housing costs and also the taxes you have to pay. So, especially in California. So, one thing you can do is, you certainly have to be very careful taking on any debt. And the best investment for many people is not putting their money into a retirement account, but paying off their debt, because debt is, you're paying a high interest rate, much higher than you can earn safely in your retirement account. But here's a risk-free way to.
That is a big drain. I mean, you have to get out of the red back to par before you can get yourself up into the black. So we need to take a quick commercial break. If If you stay with us, that'd be wonderful. And you stay with us too. We have more to come here on the income generation in just a minute. And right now, let's welcome back Laurence Kotlikoff, best-selling author and contributor at Forbes. Laurence is also a professor of economics at Boston University. He's the president of Economic Security Planning and director of the Fiscal Analysis Center. Thanks so much for sticking around.
Oh, great. Great to be with you again.
Yeah, and it's true. When we talk about being debt-free, you're talking younger ages, even at more advanced ages. I get people coming to me saying, well, gosh, Dave, you're getting me a 5% interest payment on a bond or dividend payment on the portfolio. Heck, my mortgage is only at 3.5%. Shouldn't I keep my mortgage? But what they forget about is that when you factor in the principal payment, it basically soaks up that entire 5% interest or dividend. So even in that situation, even if the math appears on the surface to make sense because you're earning more than you're paying, it may not because the amortization of principal. So I agree with you completely. Paying off debt is very important. Now, you also talk about Social Security, and it's interesting because you say that the Social Security Administration sometimes likes to take advantage of people whenever it can. So you need to make sure you plan your Social Security options to get the most benefit. And I know we've talked to you about this on previous shows. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, if you take your benefit early, if you're like the typical person, you take your benefit at 62 rather than 70, you're giving up a huge amount of lifetime benefits, because if you're patient for 8 years, your benefit will start around 72% higher for the rest of your life. And now you have to wait for 8 years, so you're sacrificing something. But it turns out that the value of this much higher number is so much more valuable than what you're sacrificing. So the smart thing would be to use retirement accounts if you have to get by, or at least wait till 68 or so, close to 70, to start collecting. But collecting at 62 is really not a smart move unless you're, sure that you're going to be passing away, let's say at 75, absolutely positive. But even then, you have to worry about whether or not you're reducing the widow's benefit or the widower benefit for your spouse, because your spouse will collect exactly your benefit, the highest benefit the benefit you're actually collecting. And if you pass away, if your benefit is higher than what your spouse is collecting. So one has to think about that as well. So it's not so easy, it's complicated.
But if I walk into the local Social Security office at age 62 and I say, I'd like to start taking my benefits today, surely they have some kind of fiduciary responsibility to tell me that I could get 72% more if I wait. Isn't that correct?
They have no responsibility, and they take no responsibility, and they provide no guidance. When they do provide guidance, it's usually take your benefit immediately. And maybe that's because they get paid based on how many retirement applications they process. I don't know what it is, or maybe they don't understand longevity risk. But every time I've heard people get advice from Social Security, it's like this. Look, you know what happens if you don't take your benefit now, you could die tomorrow and lose it. Now, of course, if you die tomorrow, you'll be in heaven. So you're not going to be kicking yourself that you've lost your Social Security money. The real problem is eating cat food when you're 90. And so being patient makes much more sense. And that's why, I developed through my company the financial planning tools, Maximize My Social Security and Maxify Planner, to help people make these decisions, because they're really very, very complicated in some cases. In other cases, if you don't have any, you're not really unusual, then the best advice is just wait till 70 to start collecting.
Now, you literally wrote the book on Social Security. You want to tell our viewers about what it is and where they can get it? We have 30 seconds left in this segment, but I'd love them to have that information.
I wrote a book with two co-authors. It's called Get What's Yours, The Secrets to Maxing Out Your Social Security. It became a New York Times bestseller. It came out in 2015, and we revised it in 2016 when they changed the law. So the current book is up to date with the current provisions, it was a bestseller. It was the number one bestseller for about 10 days, and then for 7 months it was in the top 10. So I think people can really get value out of it for sure.
Good. So go to Amazon, buy Laurence Kotlikoff's book. If you're within 10 years or even thinking about collecting Social Security, I promise you it'll be a good investment. Laurence, thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it. And you stay with us. We'll be back here with more coming up in just a moment right here on The Income Generation. We'll be right back.